All right, what's going on everyone, and welcome back. So when you're probably asking yourself, 115,000 volts, Harbor Freight, an assembly table with a raisable top, well stick around and I'll show you how I built it. All right, a quick backstory on this workbench is I do high voltage substation work for a living, and we were demoing out a 115,000 volt capacitor bank. And I was able to take one of these capacitor racks home to make this badass bench out of. The first few things I need to do to get this build kicked off is remove some of these additional accessories that I will not be using for the build. I got these two brackets that gotta come off, these four picking eyes that need to be removed, and the handful of electrical connections that gotta come off that I won't be using for this build. Get those removed, then I'll actually be cutting these four legs down to fit flush with these upper rails, which probably seems crazy because it looks like this bench sits at a good working height, but it's actually about an inch or two higher than all my other work surfaces in my shop, and I wanna do a similar top as what I did on my sanding station. So I've got this leveled up, my laser's turned on so I can scribe a nice clean even mark around all four of these legs. So I bought one of these Harbor Freight hydraulic tables. So I gotta figure out how to modify this to where it's gonna work to raise the top of this workbench. I'm gonna have to cut the casters off, or at least the brackets for it, and come up with a way to mount it in there. I wanted to put this in there to where it was lengthways, was kind of spanning the width of the bench, but there's not enough room there. So I'm gonna have to put it in there so it's length for length. Now the problem with that is it's gonna put the jacking push rod, whatever you wanna call it, out the lengthways. So I'm either gonna have to extend this out to come out the end here, or I'm gonna have to lengthen it to come out kind of more central, which is kind of more of my ideal thought. I wanted the lift base frame pieces to sit inside the two lower rails of this aluminum rack. So I made a template matching the inside profiles of the two lower rails and transferred that over to the left and right base pieces so that this would sit nice and flush inside. Big design hurdle that I had to overcome was figuring out how I was going to add this top onto the lift cart. Now the top's gonna be 4 foot by 8 foot, and this lift cart platform to begin with is super shaky and rocky, and it's only gonna be amplified as soon as I mounted this top. So what I came up with is a movable column type system. So there'll be an internal column that is fastened to the platform of the lift cart, and then an external column that's gonna be kind of matched around that to fit nice and snug. And what that's gonna do is as that lift cart platform raises and lowers inside of this column, is it'll add some rigidity when it's in the raised position.
Oh, watch this though first. Look at that. What does that look like?
All right, with this inner column finally built, it's time to move on to the exterior, which I've already attempted this once and made some poor mistakes. Shit. Mismarked my plywood, made some bad cuts. So I'm coming in for round 2, but I got a better game plan. First thing I did is I wrapped the entire outside of this column with some painter's paper, which will allow me to still snugly fit up the outer exterior columns. But once I remove this paper, after everything's assembled, it'll leave just a minute gap, which will allow some room for some lubricant, whether it's a paste wax or a polyurethane. And that'll help lubricate this as it's traveling in up and down motion and not want to bind up. The second thing I did is I put some stop blocks at the bottom of this inner column, and then I'm going to raise this table up to get it to more of a a chest height and out of this aluminum frame, which should help me freely work on it and not have to work around some obstacles. So hopefully this round 2 goes a lot better than the first round. The column component's now complete and fitting nice and snug. It's time to do a finish sanding on all the surfaces, get the exterior frame pieces mounted, and then apply a liberal amount of a homemade paste wax to ensure that this column slides nice and smoothly. With the lift cart now buried in the center of this workbench, I needed to extend the foot pedal linkage to the outside of this workbench. With some prototyping and a heim joint, this is what I came up with. This will eventually get a foot pedal to give it hands-free operation. With the additional weight of this new linkage, it made the factory foot pedal want to sag, so I added an additional spring to make up for the extra weight. Follow through with the structural theory of this column, I'll be building this roughly 8-inch thick worktop around it, which required me to cut a matching rectangle in the lower sheet of the top. The top design will loosely mimic a torsion box style top, but will feature multiple storage cubbies around the perimeter of it. I cut off about a 1/2 inch from each side to allow for my wood trim that I'll be placing on here in the future. That way when I put my 4 foot by 8 foot laminate sheet, I'll have plenty to trim off. Alright, so I got this 3/4 inch MDF loaded up. Now I need to flush trim it to fit. Now I'm not the poster child for wearing my PPE, but I'd definitely be wearing a mask and running my air filtration system. This is nasty, nasty stuff anytime you're cutting. With a leftover piece of 2x6 Doug fir, I'll be cutting all the trim for this workbench top. All of the trim pieces will be 7/16 of an inch thick to make up for the 1/2 inch I cut off all 4 sides of this workbench top. Alright, stress level at the roof. So I've got this 3/4 inch MDF top all secured and trimmed out and prepared for this black laminate top that I'll be putting on it. So I'm gonna get adhesive on both sides, let that sit for 20 or 30 minutes, and then I have the fun joy of being able to transfer this 4 foot by 8 foot laminate sheet onto the top of the workbench and hopefully get it lined up perfectly because I'm only gonna have about a 1/2 inch on all 4 sides to spare and have to come back and trim off. So if I don't get it lined up on the first shot, the whole thing's gonna be screwed up. Don't screw this up, don't screw this up, don't screw this up. It's gonna work out, it's gonna work out. An important step when you're doing a laminate top is to use some sort of spacers which will allow you to put your laminate material onto the work surface and allow you to position it and get it nice and perfect before you let the 2 surfaces meet. Because once that glue touches, it's a done deal and there's no moving it around or shifting it around. Well, that was the epic failure that I was trying to avoid. I should have cut more spacers and probably should have had a second set of hands to help maneuver that into place. But until then, I'm gonna have to figure out what I have to do with getting this adhesive off, or if I can reapply adhesive over it again here in about a week when I get a new sheet. And yeah, I'm bummed out. But there's some other things I can keep working on. In the meantime, I gotta get the casters installed and work on the foot pedal for the lift handle and whatever additional storage I wanna put on the lower side of this. So I wasn't about to be bending over to raise and lower this top with my hand, so I came up with this cool foot pedal design to raise the top. I started by drawing out how I wanted this foot pedal to look like on a scrap piece of 3/4 inch plywood, and then I laminated 3 of these sheets together to give me a little bit of thickness and rigidity with this foot pedal, and then I took it over to the bandsaw and followed my cut lines. With the foot pedal frame cut out, I used a 1-inch dowel and these hanger bolts to create the foot spindle that my foot would actually press against. I wanted this foot pedal to be removable, so I just used some 1/2-inch plywood to box around the shaft on the foot pedal that was the same dimension as the linkage arm on the bench itself. Now I can take this pedal on and off as I need it to lift it or lower the bench and not have it be in the way when I'm doing work on the bench. All right, and it's finally complete. This workbench is awesome. It's got ample storage, adjustable casters, the top height is raisable, an awesome clamping system. I don't know what else you could ask for. Now, I've been working on this since the end of June. I believe I brought the aluminum frame home on June 29th, so it's taken me a few months to make, but it was worth every minute. I ordered these casters off Amazon. They've got about an 800-pound working limit on them. The only downside I've seen so far is the rubber tabs on the end tend to fall off when you're activating the casters. These are great because you can actually raise up the table, have them roll around on the wheels, disengage the casters, and then the table sits firmly on the table legs. This bench has a ton of storage. There's cubbies around the entire perimeter of the top. The 2 end cubbies, I think I'm gonna put some slide out drawers for storing some miscellaneous consumable items. And then on the front side, there's a large cubby to store any larger items like my track saw and just other larger items. I do plan on incorporating a French cleat system around the lower perimeter of this table, especially on this back side where I've got a ton of open real estate, and then on the 2 ends. For clamping power, on half the table, I use this micro jig match fit system. This works out great. I've never used it up until this project, but so far I'm really happy with it. Super versatile and tons of clamping power. Now, the most common question I've gotten so far, especially posting progress videos on Instagram and TikTok, is how stable it is in the raised position. I'd say that's pretty damn stable. I don't plan on rebuilding an engine on this, but it'll be for assembling my woodworking projects, doing my glue ups, sanding, and some light hand planing. So for the things I'll be building with this should be just fine. I built this cool foot pedal for a hands-free lifting operation and repurposed the cart handle lowering mechanism, just made it into a pistol style grip, which has worked out awesome. All right, at the very least, I hope you enjoyed watching me build this and it's inspired you to go make something. So normally this is when someone would ask you to like the video and subscribe to their channel, but instead I'm gonna ask you to grab a broom because the shop's not gonna clean itself. All right, I'll catch you guys on the next one. See ya.